Welcome to Talent X,
the Talent Experience podcast featuring authentic conversations on the future of work,
empowering you to better understand and deliver a best-in-class, future-proofed career experience.
For more insightful conversations, visit talentxpodcast.com.
We hope you enjoy this episode of the Talent X podcast.
Hello, I'm John Hollon, and welcome to Talent X, the Talent Experience podcast. Today's guest is China Gorman. China is a highly sought-after consultant, speaker, and writer. She brings the CEO perspective to building cultures that foster strong employee engagement for top performance and innovation. She's well known for her tenure as CEO of the Great Place to Work Institute and as Chief Operating Officer and Interim CEO of SHRM, the Society for Human Resource Management, which is the world's largest professional organization for HR professionals, and for her work as Global President of Lee Hecht Harrison. China also leads the American operations of Unleash, the world's largest event organizer for the future of work in HR tech, and she sits on the corporate boards of NetForce Global and Motivus Learning, is vice chair of HRCI's board of directors, and if that's not enough, serves with me on the advisory board of the Workforce Institute at Kronos. China, did I miss anything? You've done a lot, but I may have missed a few important things along the way.
No, I think you hit the high point. I will say though, because of the world we live in right now, I'm no longer affiliated with the Unleash group, as they were a live event company, and so they've drawn back and really are recasting themselves as a content provider in an amazing way, and so no longer affiliated there. And but those other things keep me busy. Absolutely.
Okay, that's great. That's good to hear. We have a lot to talk about, and our time is tight. So let me start with this. You've written a great deal on workplace culture. So tell me, how has workplace culture fared in the wake of the pandemic and global lockdown? I've always thought of culture as the real secret sauce of great organizations, and that employee engagement flows from that. So what is the state of workforce culture when so many organizations are struggling with just doing what they can do to survive in the wake of the global lockdown?
You know, that's such a great question. And having been sort of locked down myself, you know, I'm observing sort of from afar as everyone else is. And there are some standouts who are doing it right, and there are some standouts who are doing it not right. And then, you know, as with most things, that great big middle of folks who are just kind of trying their best, maybe, and sort of poking along. When it comes to culture, it's all about leadership. It's just simply all about leadership. And if your leaders are trustworthy and open communicators, there's almost no wrong step you can make, right? And so those organizations that we see where the CEO is out in front, doesn't say everything right every single time. She might screw it up one time, or he might, go overboard, or not exactly use the appropriate language. Employees know if their leaders are trustworthy. Employees know if they can believe the words coming out of the mouths of their leaders. And if they feel like they have a relationship with those leaders, they are able to sort of be forgiving if they misspeak. But on the other hand, if boneheaded things come out of their mouths, or they, as we have seen over the last several months, and it's not just the pandemic, it's also the larger social justice environment, particularly in the United States. U.S. companies got hit with a double whammy. There's just no question. The pandemic and the social justice issues. And so very senior leaders are still struggling. How do you handle political speech in your organization? At the same time, you're dealing with the very real threat of, can the business sustain itself during these pandemic times and government regulations that in many cases are putting small and medium-sized businesses out of business. And so it all really comes down to leadership, the kind of relationship you have with your employees, whether you tell the truth or not, and whether you have a personal relationship. We'll talk about that a little bit. We'll talk about that a little bit later in one of your other questions. But the best rule of thumb I have for leaders at this point: be honest, be real, be human more than anything else, and always tell the truth. And if telling the truth means I can't talk about that right now because we're a publicly traded company and it goes against SEC guidelines, or we've got some things in the work that I think you'll be pleased about, but I can't speak about them now, always tell the truth, whether it's good news or bad news, but never, ever prevaricate, never, ever leave breadcrumbs that go in the wrong direction, never, ever make promises that you know you cannot keep. That's the path towards engagement going away, right alongside your employees going away.
Is technology any help in all of this? The debate over building culture and trying to better engage workers has gone on for a number of years. I know I've written about it a lot, and it's been a struggle. But now the growth of AI and data-driven solutions seems to offer some hope. And I know at Fuel 50, we get a lot of companies who believe that technology may be the answer to all their prayers. What's your take on this? Do you think that technology can help?
I do. I absolutely do. Let me say again, if your leaders are not trustworthy, if they cannot be believed, no amount of technology is going to make that better, right? So if we're starting at a point of your leaders tell the truth, technology can be a big help, whether it's communications, whether it's giving props and thank yous to employees, whether it's time card management, whether it's payroll, technology systems that help employers and employees be together on the same page will always help. They'll help with engagement as long as your leaders are trustworthy, honest, and believable.
One of the questions that we sort of kicked around and is something that I know you think a lot about, and you've touched on it a little bit as we've chatted here. Well, what's the responsibility of our top leaders in all of this? And I know you've talked about that a little bit. Do you think that CEOs and other senior leaders are doing what needs to be done to help their people and ultimately their organizations get through this difficult period?
I think many are. I think many leaders, big companies, global companies, medium-sized companies, startups, small companies, the leaders are really turning inward in some ways to really strengthen the relationship of their employees to the culture, right? And so I look at really three things, and this comes out of the work when I was it kind of pulled it all together for me when I was the CEO of the Great Place to Work Institute. And I know their models have changed somewhat over the last 5 years, but what really resonated with me was that I really think for a leader to be seen as human, as somebody that you want to have a relationship with, there are three characteristics. You have to be trustworthy and fair, without fail. And if you stumble, you have to own it instantly. You can't hide it. You can't try to, talk it away. You have to be trustworthy and fair in all your decisions. You can't have favorites. If the rules are the rules and somebody you really like, breaks them, there have to be consequences, and everybody has to know. The second thing is leaders now more than ever have to be personal, accessible, approachable. You have to be human. You can't be one of these leaders, and this is an example I use all the time, who gets on an elevator, not that anybody's getting on elevators anymore, but who gets on an elevator full of employees, turns their back to the employees, doesn't say a word, and gets off as fast as they can, right? You need to be that leader who gets on the crowded elevator full of your employees, turns around and starts engaging the employees. I don't think I've met you. Who are you and where do you work? We don't get to talk ever. What should I know? You know that I'm the CEO. What should I know, right? Personal, accessible, and approachable. And then the third thing that I think really leaders these days are the good ones are excelling at is really providing and acknowledging meaning in the workplace. So for every employee, there's got to be not a dotted line, a hard line to the culture, a hard line to the mission, a hard line to the work that we're doing for our customers, whoever they are. And so great leaders make sure that every employee knows what those hard lines are, knows that creates opportunities for every employee to see exactly why what they're doing moves the mission of the organization forward. Whether it's a service organization, a manufacturing organization, whatever it is, if every employee's leaders spends time with them so that they really understand what their piece of it is, even if it's really small, even if it's really huge, but they understand exactly how they fit in to the mission and to the work at hand. So those are the really three things about being a human, I think, very successful leader. Be trustworthy and fair, always, no exceptions. Be personal, accessible, and approachable. Be a person, right? Be a human being with other human beings, and then provide and acknowledge the meaning of the work of the organization, but of every employee.
So how do you do all that with the new wrinkle that so many companies are dealing with, and that is so many of their people are working remotely? Before the pandemic, I think there was some sense of maybe 10% of workers in the United States were working from home, and now that figure, depending who you hear, runs between 40 and 50%. So a large number of our workers aren't around. And, one of the things I used to do as a manager was try to walk around a lot. The old management by walking around where you are visible. And I always found people told me things when I was just stopping by to say hi that you never would imagine getting, and they were really important. How do you get that stuff now, though, with so many people working from home? How does remote work factor into trying to build a strong workplace culture?
Well, I'll share a quick story. When I became the CEO of a large global organization, it was an organization in transition. And so we needed to get a lot done in a short period of time. And because I really believe having personal relationships with your employees is really critical. And because it was a global organization and I spent like the first 6 months on airplanes, traveling from country to country to country to meet with employees, I started on my first week and I thought I was going to just do this for maybe, I don't know, a month, 6 weeks, 2 months tops. On Fridays, I would send out an email to all employees saying, I know you haven't seen me except for the people in these countries. Here's what I've been doing. Here's what I hear about what you're doing, and it's fabulous, and thank you. So every week for the first couple of months, I sent, it was an email. It was, 3-4 paragraphs, mostly about, I know you can't see me, but here's what I'm doing, and here's what I hear you're doing, and it's fabulous, right? That really was the message week over week over week. And so after the third month, and I'd been in a lot of places, and I wasn't going to be traveling quite so much, I talked to a couple of my direct reports, and I said, so I think I'm just going to do one of these once a month now. And they said, oh my gosh, it's the best thing ever. You can't stop. As long as I was the CEO in that organization, every single Friday, I sent out an email. And the connection, I got emails back so when I went to a new city and was meeting with people, I sort of already had a relationship with them. It was an email relationship, but I sort of already had a relationship with them that we could just really, start moving forward really quickly. It was maybe an accidental genius move on my part, because it tied us all super closely together. So in some ways, communicating now, because we do have the connectivity of, a Zoom call, which everybody makes fun of now, particularly after this week. We have email, and we have all kinds of ways to communicate. In some ways, communicating and creating those kinds of relationships now isn't as hard as it could have been, right? Because we have lots and lots of ways to connect with our employees, to be that trustworthy, fair, personal, and accessible leader who's providing context of meaning for everybody. And so I think in some organizations where technology isn't pervasive, it might be a little harder. But in many organizations, and maybe even most organizations, technology is so pervasive that the ability to connect via technology is there. And so there's really no excuse for not having really strong outreach and really strong connectivity with your employees.
Yeah, I have found that it's really hard to over communicate, that the more communication you give people, the more they want. And that sort of answers the last question I have, is that, what advice would you give to a fellow leader who's sought out your opinion on what they should be doing to get their organization through these times? And my guess would be you tell them, communicate more, communicate.
Yeah. And be super grateful. Every opportunity that you have, be super grateful. Our employees, wherever they are in the world, whether they're working from home, whether they're trundling into an office, no matter how and where they're working, this is a hard time. This is a super hard time. And those employees who are sticking with us in our organizations, who are innovative, who are solving problems for our customers, problems they've never seen before, they deserve our gratitude and our thanks more than ever. And you cannot, not only can you not communicate enough, you cannot say thank you enough.
Well, China, I told you this was going to go really quickly, and it has. We're about done. So we always have one more question we ask at the end of every guest we have on the TalentX podcast. And on the TalentX podcast, we wholeheartedly believe everyone should have a job that they love, that they're passionate about. So China, what do you love about what you do?
Well, I was a CEO, chief operating officer for a long time. So really in the guts of the business, the operations, and I loved it so much. I loved it so much. Now I mostly serve on boards of directors, and not being so involved with the operations, of course, is not the role of the board. But being more engaged in strategy, more engaged in future planning and future-proofing the organization. I'm loving this. This is really intellectually engaging in a way, and satisfying in a way that's so different than leading operations and fixing operational problems and measuring yourself against all the data points and all the goals. Being really future oriented is really fun. It's really fun.
Well, China, that's a great way to end. And thank you so much for spending a little time with us. I wish we could chat more, but we very much appreciate you being here and talking with us. So for Fuel 50's TalentX podcast, this is John Hollon. Thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the TalentX podcast.
For more talent experience and future of work conversations, visit talentxpodcast.com.
Follow us on Twitter at TalentX Podcast.
Or join the conversation with #TalentXPodcast on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, or Twitter.
TalentX, the Talent Experience podcast, was brought to you by the fabulous Fuelies at Fuel 50.